Today's episode of the Bill Simmons Podcast from a rainy Los Angeles on the Ringer Podcast Network is brought to you, as always, by ZipRecruiter. You know what's smart? Not questioning Bill Belichick, Kyle.
I know. It gets hard, though.
We're not franchising Trey Flowers.
I know.
It hurts my feelings, but it's smart not to question him. We've won 6 Super Bowls. You know what else isn't smart? Or you know what else is smart? Going to ZipRecruiter.com/BS to hire the right people for your business. Their technology identifies people with the right skills for your job, actively invites them to apply. Get qualified candidates fast. Try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/BS. ZipRecruiter is the smartest way to hire. Meanwhile, Mercari is the selling app that makes it fast and easy to sell almost anything. Take a few pics, add a description, boom, your item is listed. This is how I found nephew Kyle. He was on Mercari. With buyers in all 50 states, stuff really sells. Everything ships easily, so there are never any awkward meetups. You can find Mercari in the app stores. Check it out at Mercari.com. That's Mercari, Mercari. We're also brought to you by the Ringer Podcast Network. If you like Trae Young and if you enjoy watching the Atlanta Hawks, check out Winging It with Vince Carter, Kent Bazemore, Andy Finberg, because they talked to Trae Young and John Collins after All-Star Weekend. That's become the Sacramento Kings and Atlanta Hawks in a heated battle for who's the most fun league pass team right now. I enjoy both of those teams. Check them out on the Ringer Podcast Network. Check out The Ringer, where we have a bunch of great stuff right now, including Danny Kelly's just epic NFL draft guide. It's like over 12,000 words. It's really great. Riley McAtee broke down the Game of Thrones trailer exhaustively on our site yesterday. And you would have thought to yourself, well, how can you top that? Well, here's how we topped it. Mallory and Jason from Binge Mode, they broke it down with a video that is over an hour long. It's 62 minutes, Kyle.
And with the trailer, 60 seconds.
It's a short trailer. They spent 62 minutes breaking down basically every image in the trailer. It might be the most insane piece of content we've ever published, either at The Ringer or at Grantland. I was just in awe of it. There's deep dives, and then this is like the abyss. Just incredible stuff by them. So if you love Game of Thrones, check that out on our YouTube channel, which has over 100,000 subscribers. It's like at 103 now. We get like a silver button. Where's my silver button, YouTube? Y'all? Send us a button. Coming up, we're going to talk to The Ringer's Robert Mays, who I have known for this entire decade. I'm going to try to get him emotional during the pod. Don't tell him. We're going to talk about all the comings and goings that are about to happen in the NFL right now. And then Alan Sepinwall is going to come on. We're going to talk about Luke Perry, who tragically passed away at age 52. And we're going to talk about Dylan McKay and what he meant to the 90s. Luke Perry, did he get his just due? All that stuff. And then we're also going to talk about The Sopranos series finale, because I finished it 2 weeks ago and he wrote the book about The Sopranos. All right, we're going to talk football in 1 second. Want to say something quickly. I meant to do it on my last podcast, but it makes more sense to do it on this one. So Richard Plepler announced that he was leaving HBO on Friday. He was the chief executive officer of HBO. He basically ran the place. 2015, after I left ESPN, I think like 10 or 11 days later, I had dinner with him and Michael Lombardo, who was also there at the time. And they were trying to convince me to come to HBO. And the big selling point for them was, this is a place for creative people. We help them realize their vision. We help creative people create. And that's been the selling point that they've had basically for, I don't know, the last 3 decades, something like that. Really since the Larry Sanders Show, I think that's when HBO really started to become HBO. And Richard was, especially the last couple of years, the biggest piece of that. He is somebody that creators love because he puts them in position to succeed. He is very big on the whole concept of family, and he always says the word family, and you're in the family and you're part of our family. Like he created a place that didn't feel like a network. It actually did feel like a family. And if, though I've been at HBO now for 3.5 years in various ways, and it's always striking to me how many people at HBO have been at HBO for a long time. You meet somebody they've been there 20 years, 18 years, 25 years, 27 years, and I think that's one of the things that makes the place special. You know, for me, I went there to do a bunch of things. One of which was to create this talk show that didn't work. And, you know, we rushed it. We made a million mistakes with it. We rushed it. The idea wasn't right yet. It should have been monthly. There's a million things I would do over again. It happens. I learned a lot from it. And sometimes it's just the way it goes. When it ended, I just assumed that was it for me and HBO. And it was the opposite. Richard was adamant about, you know, I think we had lunch shortly after, and he was just like, look, you know, when we made a commitment to you, it was because we wanted to work with you and we wanted to do stuff with you. And it was a long-term commitment. It wasn't just a show. Like this is what we do. We want to work with creators. We want to work with the best people. And we feel like you're one of the best people. We want to keep doing stuff with you. And I was relatively shocked because I just felt like I let them down. The show didn't work, all that stuff. And it was just really cool. And I think it speaks to the kind of guy that he is and the kind of leader that he is, that, you know, they make commitments to people. They put a lot of thought into them. They put a lot of thought into what they want HBO to be. And what it is a place that they want to work with the best. They don't do a ton of stuff. And Richard would always talk about how they curate excellence and how they don't want viewers / HBO fans to have no idea whether, when they click on something, whether it's good or not. That if it's on HBO, for the most part, there's an understanding that they put a ton of time and thought and energy into why this is on HBO and how this fits into the other things they're doing. And that's the biggest reason HBO has been such an incredible success machine these last 3 decades and beyond that, obviously, but especially like really since Larry Sanders Show on, where it's just like the place that people wanted to work if you created TV shows, if you were trying to do a documentary, whatever. Curating excellence, it's a really hard thing to do. It's a mindset. It is, you have to have taste. You have to have a real belief in trusting creative people. And if you hire somebody, you're hiring, you know, their vision, the way they think about things. You try not to tinker with it. So that's the biggest reason they've been successful. And if you talk to basically anybody who has done anything that's been super successful at HBO, they will always talk about the culture, what it means to have somebody looking out for you, what it means to be nudged in the right directions. And then HBO's incredible ability to create awareness for something that's good, which is something that I experienced firsthand last year when we did Andre the Giant. We knew it was good. HBO realized it was really good pretty quickly and mobilized behind it and raised awareness for it in a way that I had just never seen before. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe how many people knew that documentary was coming. And more importantly, because HBO was making a big deal that this was coming, that made people kind of trust that they should spend an hour and a half watching it. And I think that's a really harder place to get to. And that was part of the culture that that Richard created and sustained. So when I read the stories about how he was leaving, obviously I had a feeling it was probably headed that way. I didn't know if it was going to be that soon, but you know, I don't know where HBO is going. This is such a crazy time with the media landscape where, you know, Netflix has just completely blown up the model of how people think about TV. They had 650 shows last year or something. They're spending $8 billion a year on content, and at the streaming and all this stuff, and the fact that people watch television shows where they don't even have time slots anymore for, if you're under 25, you just watch it. You press a button and it's playing. You don't think about it. It comes on at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. Thrones is going to be the last show that people even think like that. So where people fit in this landscape, how people consume content, how people watch TV, all that stuff is going to be really complicated over these next 10 years. And I think HBO's biggest advantage, other than the culture that I think Richard and some others created, was that they curated excellence and they won the trust of people that subscribed to HBO and watched it. And that was, you know, when stuff didn't work, it was surprising because it was like, wow, HBO backed this and it wasn't that good. I can't believe it. Like you'd almost be shocked by it. I'll be really interested to see if they can keep that. And I think Richard was a big part of why it stayed that way and why HBO was regarded that way. And I don't think it's something that you just move people around. This isn't like an NBA team or an NFL team where you just change the coach and it's the same thing. I think that to me, this is like, if Popovich leaves the Spurs, are the Spurs going to be the same? Maybe, but I don't know. So I look at all this stuff and I read everything. I'm an optimistic guy by nature. I think HBO still has some incredible people in place. Casey Boyes, who's running programming now, is honestly one of the smartest people I've ever worked with in my entire life. And I say that not in a Ask Casey way. He's just really smart. They have really smart people still at HBO. And I really hope that they maintain the culture that they've created over the last 3 years, that it still means something, that when something is on HBO, that it still is going to resonate, and the decision to put something on HBO still matters. I hope that's how it stays. And I think it would be cool if it was the case and that this was just a blip. I think Richard, he's still young enough, whatever his next job is going to be, it's going to be awesome. I think he has at least one more great act in him wherever he goes. But he's a guy that meant a lot to me professionally. And it's just weird to read the stories, but I never really heard from that many people who actually crossed paths with them and worked with them. And he really was that great. He was just a great leader. And one of those guys, I've even said this to him, it almost felt like an actor was playing him the whole time. Like he really was one of a kind, like always impeccably dressed. Just felt like a boss. And that's why wherever he goes next, it'll be the same thing. Some people just have that extra something. And I feel like he has it. And I'm going to miss working with him. So that's it. I just wanted to say that. All right, we're going to call Robert Mays right now. All right, on the line right now, a man that I've known for this entire decade. I said beforehand I was going to try to make you cry during the podcast. I don't know. It's like I have a 50-50 chance. I was actually going through pictures, found some classics from 2010, 2011. I've known this man for a long time. Robert Mays, how are you?
It's crazy that it's been the entire decade. I'm also terrified of what those pictures look like. I'm a much slimmer man now than I was in those days.
Yeah, there's a couple good ones. That's all right, man. We all had our stages. NFL really heating up right now. We are heading. It's weird. The NFL's kind of figured out how to own this little stretch of time right now, right before like March Madness kicks in. It's after All-Star Weekend, and all of a sudden for about 2 weeks, it feels like everybody cares where everybody's going. What do you think is the number one storyline right now?
I think it's Kyler Murray. I think it's Kyler Murray just because it's happened so fast. The Antonio Brown thing, I feel like the news cycle of that is already nearing its tail end. The Steelers came out and said it was going to be settled by Friday. So it feels like we've had a lot of time to process the idea that Antonio Brown was going to be on a different team.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like we're only in day 5 or 6 of the notion that Kyler Murray could be the number 1 pick in the draft, and a Cardinals team that drafted a guy in the top 10 last year might be willing to move on from him. I'm still in the process of kind of reconciling and processing that.
Do you agree with that?
Yes. I feel like if you believe Kyler Murray is the guy, then you should move on from Josh Rosen.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to happen for a bunch of different reasons. If you're Steve Keim, the GM of the Cardinals, that's a really tough thing to admit 11 months later, that you screwed up your top 10 pick so badly that you're going to have to deal that guy and spend another pick, another quality pick, another high pick on a quarterback. That's really hard to sell. But if you can sell your owner on that, if you can say with Kingsbury, with being able to get a 2 or a 3 for Rosen, we feel like there's no reason to chase bad decisions with other bad decisions.
So just to commemorate this GM of the Cardinals, who had one of the most amazing years, I think, of any sports executive, he hired a coach that he then fired within a 16-game season. He traded up. Didn't he trade up for Josh Rosen to draft Josh Rosen, who then he is moving off of after a year so he can spend the number 1 pick in the draft, which they earned because of all his terrible decisions and for the fact that they created one of the worst cultures in recent memory. And now they're going to put Kyler Murray in it with this coach who had a losing record at Texas Tech. It all sounds great. If I was a Cardinals fan, I would be going nuts. I'm like, hey, here's an idea. Why don't we trade you, GM, moron who put us in all of these bad situations? Maybe you should be the one that leaves.
It all unraveled very quickly for them because if you look back at the 2015 season, I mean, Carson Palmer is a borderline MVP candidate that year. If Cam Newton didn't win it that year, Carson Palmer would have. That team is a game away from the Super Bowl. And then the 2016 season happens. Palmer gets hurt. Arians retires. It all unraveled very fast, and they didn't really have a plan in place because they're trying to win right now in 2015 and 2016, and they mortgaged their future in a pretty bad way. They had no receivers. They had no offensive linemen. The offensive lineman they did have got hurt. So it just really, it's hard to kind of comprehend how many things went as badly as possible for them in a very short period of time. And the Wilks thing, I know it looks bad to fire an African-American coach 1 year into his tenure and hire a guy who was sub 500 at Texas Tech. Yeah. But I also understand how it happens in the NFL right now. The quickest way and the most consistent way to success is to have an offensive-minded head coach that's also your play caller. I mean, Les Snead said it at the Combine last week. They were asking him, how are you going to deal with losing all of these assistants? And he was kind of like, what do you mean? It doesn't matter. Sean McVay is the offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
And I understand why you would go back on a decision to try to get the most you possibly can out of your quarterback. The problem now is it seems like they're about to jettison that quarterback.
Yeah. And he's somebody that I changed my mind on 11 times last season. And I can't even remember where I landed. I can't remember if I think he's going to be good or not. There were times when he seemed pretty poised and at least a little bit in the Rodgers phylum. And by the end of the season, it just was unclear whether his confidence was gone. Their offensive line was awful, et cetera, et cetera. I would be, if you could get him for a second round pick with the contract that he's under, to me, that's a no-brainer. I'd actually be shocked if that was all it took. You really think it's just second or third round pick for him?
And that's where Peter King reported last week. If it's a third round pick, I'm not exaggerating here. I think every team in the NFL should consider doing this.
Yeah.
Because you'd spend a third round pick on your backup quarterback, right? That's what you would use, a third round pick for your backup quarterback. So if that's the price you have in mind for that position, and you can make Josh Rosen nominally your backup quarterback on his contract, think about that. I mean,
and didn't they pay some of it already? Like it's actually like less
bonus.
Money than it should be. Yeah.
Yes, the signing bonus. So all you're on the hook for, I believe, are the base salaries and the roster bonuses. So you're looking at like the most, like $3 million in the final year of that deal. Chase Daniel makes $6 million for the Bears right now. So with that in mind, if you're the Chargers, if you're the Steelers, if you're the Patriots, all of these teams that need a future at quarterback and don't really want to spend a ton of draft capital to find it, this is a really good move. And for a team like Washington that is so desperately in need of both a future answer at quarterback and a cheap answer at quarterback, considering it's paying Alex Smith $20 million, I feel like they have to be the team that's willing to give up maybe a little bit more, at least a second round pick, because they are more desperate than any other team at quarterback right now.
Hold on, let me check with nephew Kyle, who watched more than a couple Cardinals games on season ticket with me. You used to be in the seat that he sat in, Maze, before you left us. Kyle,
what's the time mark? 6 minutes and 46 seconds.
Well, you left. It was a stupid move. I stand by thinking it was dumb. Number 56 pick for Josh Rosen. Would you sign up for that right now, Kyle?
Yes.
We have 12 picks.
Yes, definitely. Yes, I would.
I think I would too. I mean, he might actually be good. Are we going to get somebody better than him as a quarterback prospect at pick 56? I would do that right now.
You wouldn't. And I understand he looked terrible last year, but I stand by the idea that it's impossible to evaluate him based on what they were. They fired their offensive coordinator like 5 games into the season. They had no offensive line. They had no receivers.
They had the worst line in the league.
Yes, by far. It's not out of the question to say it's the worst set of circumstances a highly drafted rookie quarterback has been dropped into in recent memory. And that includes Jared Goff with Jeff Fisher and Mitchell Trubisky with John Fox. It's saying a lot.
Yeah, that is true. There's been some bad situations. The best part of it would be the ringer ripples. Mallory Rubin, the Pats having a Jewish quarterback would be one of the funniest subplots of all time, because it is not in her to root against Josh Rosen. She would just never be able to do it. But she hates the Patriots like they're Al Qaeda. And that combo would just be that, combined with Game of Thrones coming up. I really think we'd have to put her in like a mental hospital for like a week just to like unwind. It would be unbelievable. I can't wait.
And just the looming like Lamar Jackson existential crisis that she's going to go through this fall.
Yeah. Oh my God. The Ravens, they're like little league parents telling themselves it's all right after the Lamar Jackson debacle. Well, he was really good in the fourth quarter. He got his legs. It was like, hey, you guys were down 20.
They
I still
have
like
to commit
Lamar.
to it for at least another year.
I still like Lamar.
We'll see how it goes. I have my concerns. The other team, if we're talking about it from the Jewish quarterback perspective, that absolutely should be in on this and won't because they never make a smart decision anymore, is the Giants.
Oh my God.
In a way, if they were to deal like a second round pick for Josh Rosen, it would almost rectify the terrible decision they made last year to just forego quarterback and ride with Eli again.
So they have the 37th pick. The Patriots have 32, which is the last pick in the first round, because we won the Super Bowl again, Mace. I don't know if you realized. Were you there? Oh, yeah.
I did black out? I was there. I was at the game.
We won the Super Bowl again. So we have when you win the Super Bowl, you don't remember this because the Bears haven't won in your lifetime. When you win the Super Bowl, you get the last pick of the draft. That's how it works out.
That sounds wonderful.
So we have the 32nd pick. It does feel like the Giants just giving 37 for Josh Rosen right now would have a 100% approval rating with their fan base. It's just a good trade.
I absolutely think it would, because then you get to spend your top 10 pick on a top 10 player. That's why I believe that so many teams should be considering this, because if you're a team that needs a rookie quarterback, the only thing that you're not getting if you trade for Josh Rosen is that first year of that rookie contract. Yeah. And I almost think that because you don't have to hand out the signing bonus, that makes it worth it. So what's the difference?
And then I think of all the sports, this is the single most important thing to roll the dice with, because if the guy is actually pretty good, would you have 3 more this year and 2 more after on that contract, or is it 5? Is it 4 or 5?
It's a 5 year. 5. You have the 5th year option,
right? So
yeah,
even if it's let's say it's a coin flip. Let's say it's a 50% chance that he can become an above average starting quarterback, and you're paying him that contract, which is 0. It's zip. It's nothing. Like, how do the Patriots not roll the dice with that? Unless they just scouted him and decided that guy sucks. There's just no way it's happening. But
that's possible.
I just felt like too many people who watch college football said that he had too many moments that were positive for him to just be a complete bust in the NFL. He was playing these high profile games for UCLA, and I don't know. I refuse to believe he's going to be a bust. I actually liked the way he carried himself the first part of the year before his line fell apart on him. I thought there was a poise to him that I kind of liked.
There are 2 things I feel like we have to take into consideration here. One is that something Dan Orlovsky pointed out on Twitter that I thought was very smart. Beyond all the turnover in Arizona last year, he had a bunch of different offensive coordinators in college.
Yeah.
When he was at UCLA, he had to deal with all of this inconsistency. And 2, I feel like you have to wonder something. I talked to the old Rams quarterbacks coach about this his first year when he got there with McVay about Goff. And they said that they thought 7 games was the perfect amount of starts for Goff as a rookie with Jeff Fisher, because it got him introduced to the league, but it didn't develop scar tissue. They could still kind of make him the quarterback they wanted to. So your concern with Rosen is, we know the circumstances were terrible, but were they so terrible that it's left lasting damage that it's going to be hard to get over? And I think there's so many things you have to take into consideration with him. But if you're the Giants, right, you have the 6th pick. There's a good chance that the top 2 quarterbacks, whether it's Murray or Haskins or something, will be taken in the top 3. That's just how it seems to go every single year. So you'd have to trade up to get one of those top 2 quarterbacks. If you sit there at 6 and you trade for Josh Rosen, you won't have to move up and give away future picks, and you can use your pick at number 6. I just think that a smart team is going to realize that the chances of Josh Rosen succeeding are as high or higher than they are for every quarterback outside the top 2 in this draft, and it's worth going after him with a much, much lower pick.
Plus, if you're the Giants, he's the only QB out there who has less muscle tone than Eli. So you have that.
Oh, I don't know, man. There are a few guys that can give you a run for your money there. Jared Goff is 100% in that conversation.
Jared Goff. So
Ben Roethlisberger's right there. Trust me, that list is longer than you think.
So would you, by the way, I think that works out great for the Giants. And now I hope it doesn't happen because I hate the Giants and I'll never forgive any of their fans for all the shit they talked after my 2 Super Bowl losses. Do you think Kyler Murray is good enough to be the first pick? Do you sign off on that concept?
Yes.
Okay. Russell Wilson 2.0?
I think they're different players. I mean, I think that, Kyler Murray has such a strong arm. Russell Wilson does too, but I think that Murray gives you everything you want. He's accurate. I mean, his numbers are comparable to Baker Mayfield's when you just look at the completion percentage and everything he did in college. The system's very similar, obviously. I think Baker is on a completely different level as a prospect, but I feel like if you just look at the pure talent and production and results from Murray, there's not a huge argument as to why he shouldn't be the first overall pick in the draft.
Well, I was against it if he was 5'8", but those 2 extra inches really did it for me. 5'10" is doable. I don't feel like 5'8" is doable. About. Yeah.
Can you get over that bar? That's what the combine is from a measurements perspective. As long as you're clearing these kind of hurdles and checking the boxes, that's all you need to do. It doesn't matter if he's 6 foot, but as long as he's not 5'8", 160, then we're good to go.
Right. And he's not. So, and it would also be really fun. And, if you're Arizona, and you've just had one of the biggest organizational shit shows of the last 12 months that anybody's had. Like, at least he's exciting. You get another pick for Rosen. I can't believe he's not worth a first round pick. I'm just stunned by that. Doesn't anybody understand football and like the fact that if you can put any rookie in the worst possible situation and they're going to look bad? Like, that's just what football is. The Patriots had Jim Plunkett was my first favorite quarterback in the early 70s. My first favorite Patriots team was like 73, 74, that range. And Plunkett was the first overall pick. Can't miss. No way this guy wasn't going to be great. And they just put a bunch of shitty teams around him. And by like 1975, he was a shell of himself. And they traded him to San Francisco. And then he was out of the league. And then famously was resurrected by Al Davis and won a Super Bowl. But I think that's the all-time. You talked about scar tissue. That dude had more scar tissue than probably any QB ever, just mental. So I think we always discount if you put a bad offensive line and bad coaches around a young quarterback, it's going to go terribly. How does it not go terribly? It's impossible.
That's what this is all about. I mean, the list of quarterbacks that can transcend their surroundings and be good no matter what, I don't even know how long that list is. It might be like one guy long, and it was Aaron Rodgers like 5 years ago. That's just not realistic. Everybody needs a little bit of help at the very least, and he had none. I understand he looked really bad, but I'd still be taking a chance on him. That third round pick thing, that's not my belief. I would give up more than that for him. Let's think about how much it cost to get Sam Bradford from Minnesota from the Eagles a couple years ago.
Right.
That's also something to consider with this. The price for a quarterback on the trade market, even for a guy like Rosen, who's a top 10 pick, it's going to shift depending on how desperate teams get and what the demand is. Right now, most teams are set at quarterback. But if we get to August and somebody goes down with a devastating injury like Teddy Bridgewater did, that's how the market shifts. So if you're Arizona, do you just say, we're hanging on to both of them and we're going to wait to see what sort of trade market develops for Rosen? I don't know the answer to that because you're also sacrificing leverage because people know you need to trade him. So there's a lot of different moving parts here.
Yeah, and if you go through all the teams from like 17 on in the first round, it's not really realistic except for the Steelers. And if they traded their first round pick for a quarterback, I don't think Roethlisberger would handle that well. On top of
all really? You don't think so?
No, that would be my expert opinion. And then you just go on down the line. I don't know who else would, maybe Oakland. They have those 3 picks. And if they decided they're just going to move on from Carr or do whatever and, I don't really see them doing that. And then all of a sudden we're out of the first round. Everybody else has a quarterback. The Jags at 38, maybe. Tampa 39.
Well, if the Jags sign Foles, then it's a done deal. I don't think they'd give up more draft capital for a quarterback. They're on a pretty short-term schedule right now.
It's a bad idea, spending $20 million a year on Nick Foles.
I still don't
throwing that out
understand
there. It's just like
They
they just need competency at quarterback. They don't need like an overwhelmingly good performance. And Foles on a cheap deal makes sense, but paying Foles like market good starting quarterback value on that team, I don't see it. I'd rather have Case Keenum for like $3 million a year.
The problem with Jacksonville is their timeline, because if you look at a lot of the contracts they've signed and you just consider the financial realities of that team, that core is going to not stay together for very long.
Right.
In order to sign Foles, they essentially have to cut Malik Jackson and do some other cap gymnastics to even do it.
That's a mistake.
This kind of world-beating defense that we're used to in Jacksonville is already falling apart because of the financial concerns that they have to worry about with Foles. So I feel like with them, yes, we could draft a quarterback at 7. Yes, we can maybe trade up for one, but how long does that guy take to develop? How much of our team is in place while that's happening? I don't agree with that line of thinking, but I'm assuming that's why they're motivated to fix it right now.
And like Tampa is another one that I wonder what they're going to do. They can't possibly run it back with Jameis. I don't understand that one either. They have the 7th pick and they have the 39th pick. That's another team that should be thinking about Rosen. 7's obviously too high, but 39 is right in the range. I don't know. I don't know what the teams, the way they misevaluate QBs is really consistently unbelievable to me. Like Denver signing Flacco was just incredible for me. I thought it was like an Onion article.
It's unbelievable.
I was like, are you saying?
Unbelievable.
Oh my God, this is your move?
It's my favorite thing. The one just idea we can rely on in professional football is John Elway looking at a 6'6" quarterback and being like, that's my guy. Let's do this.
He's so tall. It's
amazing. We have these jokes kind of pop up around certain decision makers. It's like so-and-so loves this kind of player. And it's always a little bit exaggerated. You know, it's a parody of itself in a way. John Elway, this is not a joke. He wanted to sign Brock Osweiler. He drafted Paxton Lynch, both of whom are 6'7" and are way too tall to play quarterback in the NFL. And then went out of his way to go get Joe Flacco, who no one wants. Everything about it is amazing.
I wish I had like a type that people like for hiring for the Ringer that people made fun of me for. Like if I really loved 6'6" editors, it was like somebody Slate just laid some people off. There's a 6'6" editor available, and I'm like, oh, let's get him. He sounds great.
You're like Belichick. You're breaking tendencies.
He'll be so tall and intimidating at the computer. John Elway, come on, John Elway.
He can see over the line under center. That's the most important thing.
I want to talk about Le'Veon Bell, but let's take a break. We're going to take a break to talk about Hulu Plus. Here's the thing about being a Boston sports fan this century. With 11 titles and counting. 12 titles? I think we have 12. It just completely ruins you as a sports fan. Suddenly you expect a title every year. Or in my case, every couple months. That's the funny thing about better. Once you've experienced it, you can't go back. That's the gist of that Hulu commercial I've been seeing everywhere. It's all about how Hulu has tons of shows and movies, exclusive originals like The Handmaid's Tale, plus live TV for sports, and that once you get Hulu, it's going to ruin TV for you forever. So start your free Hulu trial today at hulu.com, Hulu, hulu.com. Live TV plan required for live content. Restrictions apply. All right, so Le'Veon Bell took a year off from playing football to create a situation where he was going to be a marquee free agent in a league where nobody wants to spend more than $10 an hour on a running back. Did you agree with this decision?
Everything about it was wrong. Everything about it was misguided. And especially when he sees the market and how it's going to unfold right now, walking away from $14 million last year was not a smart idea. I just don't know. We went over this a lot at the Combine. We're sitting at dinners and just kind of going through every single team that we thought might be interested in signing him. And you just can't come up with very many. It's really hard to find a list of 5 teams that realistically would want him.
I'm trying to think of anyone in my lifetime who held out and missed an entire year and it worked out. Because I remember when I was a kid, I used to love Gus Williams on Seattle. And they won the title, I think, in 79. He was this point guard who was just kind of this new school point guard, athletic. He was kind of balding. He could dunk. He could shoot. He was great. And in like 1982, he just held out. And he wanted like $900,000 a year. And they Seattle wanted to pay $500 and went back and forth. And he missed the whole year. And then ended up signing a deal and he got traded to Washington and never made the money back. And I was like 13. I'm like, what is this guy doing? He just gave this money away for no reason. And I've just never really seen it work. Missing the whole year. If there's some example that I'm missing, please feel free to email us at the mailbag@theringer.com. But it's just money you're never getting back. It doesn't work. On top of it, he really doesn't seem to have any suitors. Your guess would be the Jets, or would you rule out the Colts?
The Colts, absolutely not. And Chris Ballard is way too smart to give Le'Veon Bell a bunch of money. It doesn't matter that they have all that space. So if we're ruling out the Colts, just because I don't feel like their GM would ever do it, and the Jets have said they don't want to. I mean, that report has kind of come out that they want some cheaper guys. That was the team I'd always just penciled it in. It's like they have so much space. They have a need at running back. They don't have a history of making really prudent decisions. Their GM is definitely backed up against the wall. But if they're not going to do it, then I think it gets really bad really fast.
So you don't even have like a dark horse candidate?
The Bucs are my dark horse candidate.
Oh, okay. That sounds
They don't have that
terrible.
much cap space, but they have some cuts to make if they want to. Here's the thing with pretty much every single one of these teams can sign whatever players they want. I mean, almost anyone can come up with the space to get a player under the cap. Remember a couple years ago when the Saints were like $2 million over the cap and then signed Jarvis Bird? It's like a $15 million safety contract. It doesn't matter. Most of these teams can figure out how to make this happen. I mean, you look at the Bucs, they can cut Cameron Brate, they can cut William Golston, they can cut so many guys and just free up space. Jason Pierre-Paul, if they want to, they can. So many teams can just convert base salary money into signing bonus money in order to free up space immediately. It's all possible. And with the Bucs, it's kind of the same sort of stuff, right? One of the reasons I don't think they wouldn't be keen to spend draft capital on a new quarterback is because their GM is kind of up against the wall. They need to win right now. And I think Le'Veon Bell is the type of move that it's splashy. You could argue that we're just trying to win football games. Some team that's not smart is going to do this. I just don't know which not smart team it is.
It's funny. The biggest thing one of the biggest things that's changed for following sports as I stare down 50 in September is the flashy move. Teams are now smart enough to realize that that's stupid. Because there was this, we're talking decades of somebody would sign Le'Veon Bell and the fans who actually knew anything would be like, wow, that's stupid. Why'd we do that? But the team cared about the flashiness of it. And that was really that was the Red Sox for 15 years of my life. I feel like teams don't think that way anymore. They've finally at least wisened up enough to know that it's not good to try to win this newspaper headline thing for 24 hours or this, I guess, internet headline thing for 24 hours. Ultimately, you really can't think that way. And I don't think anybody is thinking that way anymore. So I look at Le'Veon Bell, I'm like,
I don't know about that. When the Antonio Brown gets traded to the Redskins tomorrow, I think you're going to regret this.
No. The Redskins and Raiders don't count. I'm not counting them as real franchises. Sure. Okay. No, I'm not. John Gruden and Daniel Snyder are immune. I was talking about normal sports franchises.
All right. That's totally fine.
Yeah. Now the Redskins, I mean, this is the Albert Hainsworth signing, right? Hey, we got Albert Hainsworth. Yeah. And the Redskins fans are like, wait, what? Why? Is that a real number? Why did we do that?
The Redskins have $17 million in cap space and they don't have a quarterback at all. And I guarantee you they're going to be the team that just comes away with Antonio Brown for $12 million by the end of the week. It's going to be incredible. I'm going to love every second of it.
Well, that would suck for me and House because we bet initially on the 49ers at like plus 400. And then we put in another bet on the Raiders a couple days ago at plus 350. So you think the
Raiders doing it? I mean, it's the Redskins and the Raiders. I think they're the two teams that are most apt to do it for the reasons that you just said.
Well, the Raiders have the combination of just a shitload of picks and, need some sort of narrative that isn't just they've gutted the entire team and now here are some new guys. It makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense. The most fun scenario for me would be if San Francisco somehow signed Le'Veon Bell to a Revis contract for like 1 year, $20 million, and then traded for Antonio Brown and basically just put together the Steelers in San Francisco. That would be fun. I'd vote for that.
The problem is the 49ers handed Jerick McKinnon a contract last offseason that made absolutely no sense, and they owe him most of the money from that.
Oh, so
no. It's hard to picture them in the Le'Veon Bell sweepstakes. They paid Jerick McKinnon 4 years, $30 million, And $6 million of that is still dead money if they cut him right now. So I would assume that Jerick McKinnon will be back.
The Patriots didn't franchise tag Trey Flowers. And if we hadn't won 6 Super Bowls and I didn't trust Belichick completely, I would have been bummed out about it. Should I be bummed out anyway that they didn't franchise tag Trey Flowers? Because it seems like that's just the easiest thing to do, is just you lock somebody in for 1 year and no long-term commitments.
That's really big number to hand out to one position. And I know Belichick hates to do it, especially at edge rusher. He never values that spot when it comes to spending a ton of money on those guys. Think about how many players he's traded or just let go. Chandler Jones, Richard Seymour. They didn't franchise tag Flowers. We'll see if he's back. But if you're going to pay that guy upwards of $20 million for one season, I think Belichick would rather say, I'll take the comp pick next year and we'll move on. I mean, he does it all the time. And this is not an exception to that.
Yeah, that's exactly what he's going to do. And it's logical. It's just going to be a bummer when we don't have a pass rush in week 6 and everybody's talking about, I wish we had Trey Flowers, and then we'll win the Super Bowl again. It'll be fine.
But think about what happened in the Super Bowl. It had nothing to do with Trey Flowers making plays off the edge. It's guys like Adrian Claiborne and Dante Hightower and just dudes that are all built the exact same way. They're like 6'3", 280, and they can just move all around the line. That's what the pass rush is for the Patriots. That's why they're not prone to valuing guys at that spot, because they feel like they can manufacture one when they need it.
I want you to admit to everybody that was actually, for a football nerd like yourself, and you're way up there in the football nerds that I know, that was actually a secretly enjoyable Super Bowl. Just admit it.
I've said that it was interesting, but not exciting. That's how I've described it.
Great
because
strategy.
In the moment, it was not exciting.
Great strategy, though. A lot of stuff going on.
Going back and watching the game was fascinating, but being at the game was miserable. I mean, I think both of those things can be true.
How about when the Pats, when they ran the big lineup in the fourth quarter, but then spread everybody out and they had fucking fullback in the wide receiver deep threat spot and tight ends.
I mean,
you love that. You loved it.
Yes, I do. I absolutely love that.
Okay.
Trust me, there are a lot of cool things to take from that game. It was very fun to analyze, but it was not fun to watch in the building. There was no energy in that place for 4 hours.
You know what's one of the most fun things to take from that game that really hasn't gotten enough momentum, in my opinion? Just an epic shit show from Sean McVay. It's amazing we even talk about him as a wonder boy anymore. That was one of the worst coaching performances I've ever seen in a big game. Certainly one of the worst ever against the Patriots, where they just did the same thing the whole game. They ran no kitchen sink stuff. They never ran their running backs. Our one weakness the whole year, which I kept talking about on the podcast, was wheel routes and delayed screens and just running backs in space against our linebackers was the death of the Patriots. They never did it. And I'm still in disbelief. I've watched the game 3 times. I'm just in disbelief I don't know what their game plan was. It was bizarre. I have no explanation for it. What'd you think?
I don't know if we'll ever have an explanation for Gurley and just the lack of usage, not from a running perspective, but just motioning him into the slot and making Dante Hightower cover him. I still will never understand how that didn't happen. Outside of that, though, there are guys open in that game. And the problem was Goff was just swimming. He was swimming the entire game. He was just treading water. Belichick knew exactly how to confuse him early in downs and not allow him to get rid of the ball, and the pass rush got home. He just is not a quick decision maker when not everything is defined. And because New England was doing so many different things on defense and mixing up coverages, he just didn't know what was coming. He never had a feel for what was about to happen. And that's why you just see him patting the ball. That's why he's a second late on that supposed touchdown throw to Brandon Cooks that should have happened. And there's so many moments in that game where you can just see his lack of ability to anticipate and to process information quickly just doomed them. And that was the biggest problem. I thought McVay was fine. It wasn't good. There were mistakes, but I feel like the shortcomings at quarterback are ultimately going to doom you against the Patriots the same way we've seen pretty much every single year. Whether it's the AFC Championship game with Bortles or the Super Bowl with Goff, if you're not good enough at that position, they're going to take advantage of you in the biggest moments, period.
If Todd Gurley was actually healthy for that game, that's one of the most embarrassing coaching games I've ever seen. I have no idea if he was healthy or not.
Well, I just have to believe he wasn't.
Why haven't they had the surgery yet? Why haven't they fixed his meniscus or whatever
Well,
the
the
fuck was
report
wrong
came
with
out this week that it's arthritic. He has an arthritic knee. That was the report that came out this week.
him? Ooh. So
Yep.
what?
So if that's true, it helps
Oof.
explain some things.
I mean, that's a disaster because they just gave him that giant contract.
Yep. I don't know if that's true, but if it is true, then it's not a good thing. And it points to why Le'Veon Bell probably shouldn't get paid very much, because giving a lot of money to players at that position is a dangerous, dangerous thing.
As you watched a young quarterback completely self-combust in the Super Bowl and make decisions a second late and just kind of kill his team, did you have a flash forward moment to Mitch Trubisky in one of the next 3 Super Bowls, re-experiencing the same thing?
You have to. You have to sit there and say, if your quarterback isn't good enough, none of the rest of this matters. And that's why when I sit and just think about the Bears and everyone's like, yeah, with the defense and and all this, and they don't have any money to spend in free agency, and how can they get any better? It's like, it doesn't matter. If the quarterback doesn't get better, the rest of this is totally irrelevant. And it's not a complicated thing, and it's not that interesting to say, but I really do feel like that's kind of where we are with the NFL. I mean, Nick Foles, was he a backup last year? Yes. But did he just get lit on fire for 2 weeks? Also, yes. He was very good. You need your quarterback to be good to win in those games, because even if you get close, eventually that guy is going to sabotage you.
How hard are you going to laugh when somebody gives $70 million to Tevin Coleman?
I don't know if that's going to happen, because it's the same thing as we're seeing with Le'Veon Bell. Like, why would a team give Tevin Coleman a monster contract?
Why does anybody do anything?
I know. But I just think at running back, it's become harder and harder to justify.
All right.
And with Tevin Coleman, it's not as if you're selling to your fan base, look, we just got Tevin Coleman. I mean, on that side of it, it's much easier to sell Le'Veon Bell to your ownership than it is to sell Tevin Coleman.
I'm looking, does Miami have a first round pick this year? Oh, they're 13.
Yes.
I was thinking they could be a Josh Rosen.
Oh, they absolutely should be a Josh
Miami's
Rosen
48. They have 48 too.
I don't know what they're going to do. I mean, I assume they're going to cut Tannehill, and then they're one of the teams that needs a quarterback very quickly as well. Washington, and that's really it right now.
I have 2 more questions for you, and then you have to go tape House of Carbs. First of all, who is your favorite available free agent? The one, as I said earlier, you're one of the biggest football nerds I know, and you tend to gravitate towards certain players. They're usually 360-pound offensive linemen. Sometimes they're nose tackles. Occasionally, maybe an edge rusher. Who is your favorite free agent? Who is hitting a 10 out of 10 on the Mays scale right now?
I love Trey Flowers. I mean, I wrote about him coming into the Super Bowl.
You motherfucker! You just told me we shouldn't franchise tag him. Now you love Trey Flowers?
If I was another team, I would pay Trey Flowers. But I know Belichick isn't going to.
Okay.
If I'm the Colts or a team like that, I absolutely would give him the money, because I think he's really good. He's the type of guy, it was like Calais Campbell when he was in Arizona. The way they used him, he was never going to get 15 sacks. He was lining up inside a lot. He was asked to do a bunch of different things on the interior. And then as soon as he comes a defensive end for Jacksonville, he's getting 13 sacks a year. Yeah. I think that Trey Flowers might be that kind of player. I think used in a slightly different way, in a slightly different role, he could be a guy that warrants a $16, $17 million a year contract. I just think he does every little thing right. I mean, he's the perfect Patriots defensive player in a lot of ways. He just doesn't play a position they value. Outside of that, I mean, like, if you can get Earl Thomas, that's pretty awesome. It's a weird free agent class. There aren't that many big names, but I do think a lot of these defensive players are going to make teams better, whether it's Landon Collins, Earl Thomas, Tyrann Mathieu. I mean, these dudes can play.
Just a side question. So I guess I have 3 questions. This is the second one. What free agent could the Patriots sign the next 3 weeks that you would just be bummed out?
Golden Tate.
Mm-hmm. Now Kyle's just jostled in his seat. I fucking love Golden Tate.
Yeah.
You know what he'd be better than?
Golden Tate too.
Everybody who was our second receiver last year. all the guys who were just blanketed by everybody else's cornerback. Yeah, I'm in on Golden Tate. All right, last question. Because I know you're watching you went to the combine. I know you're at the stage where you're watching YouTube clips of random offensive linemen. Probably a little too much. It's weird. It's almost a borderline fetish of you watching offensive linemen just blowing people off the
I
line.
watch all positions equally.
No,
I just
it's
like
a little bit of
offensive
a
linemen
fetish.
more than the average person.
Who's that dude on the Colts? Quentin Nelson. Like you've definitely
Oh,
spent
yeah.
over 100 hours watching Quentin Nelson tape. Who is your favorite?
As everyone should.
Who is your favorite guy in the draft for offensive linemen?
Honestly, I have not watched that many guys, but
Okay.
the one guy that keeps jumping out, because it's free agency happens first. It's like the weird thing about the NFL calendar
Yeah.
is that we go to the combine and then free agency happens like 5 days later. But Bradbury, the NC State center, everyone seems to love him. And I just think he's one of those guys from everything I've heard, Garrett Bradbury, that's just going to get drafted by a team and be a 10-year starter in the NFL. And I just love players like that. I think that dudes like Travis Frederick, players of that ilk are really good investments. And I think that a team like the Rams or the Panthers, somebody like that is going to draft that guy in the first round and be very happy about it.
It's funny how it's always like a center or a safety. I remember the year Ed Reed got drafted. I can't remember where he went in the draft, but everybody agreed that he was like one of the best 2 or 3 players in the draft, but he went like 8th or 10th or whatever. And it was just clear immediately that guy was going to be awesome for 10 years. And it's funny how people never just kind of want to take that person in the top 3, but we all know the guy's going to be awesome. So you think the center is going to be that guy this year?
He just seems really safe. And then the linebackers, I mean, Devin White from LSU, everyone just thinks is going to be somebody you can drop in. He'll play forever. I just like players like that where you just feel really good about who they're going to be. And that's why it was funny last year when Quentin Nelson went 6th and everyone was like, God, that's too high for a guard, everything else. And then you watch Quentin Nelson play. It's like, oh yeah, he's one of the best 5 guards in the league already. He's going to be on our team
Right.
for 12 years.
Yeah.
And we all knew that going in.
Yeah. Colts, would that be your kind of that's kind of the X Factor team, it feels like, heading into free agency, because they have like $700 million to spend and a quarterback that nearly brought you to tears and joy a couple times last year because you really missed him so much.
It's fun to have him back. He's a fun
Yeah.
player. He seems like a good guy. The league is better with him in it.
Me,
They
I
have
agree.
$107 million in space. They have an extra top 35 pick from the Jets. Like, in my opinion, they're the team that holds the cards in all of this.
And they actually have a competent GM, which they did not have before. Right.
Arguably, like the best GM of the last year. I mean, what he's done is remarkable. The position that they're in and how quickly he's turned that around, it's hard to overstate how impressive it is.
Mays, we can listen to you on the Ringer NFL show, and we can read you on theringer.com, and we might even let you on a Rewatchables podcast this year. I'm still sorting out my feelings about it.
Look at that. I'm so excited about not being on one.
You did leave us. I mean, you literally left. You were here
This is
and
my
then you
punishment.
left.
I hope people understand that I have watched every one of these movies like 20 times. This is my favorite idea for a podcast ever. I listen to every single one of them. And my continued punishment for leaving Los Angeles 3.5 years ago is that I'm not allowed on the Rewatchables.
Well, it hurt my feelings, and it continues to hurt my feelings. Robert Mays.
I just want people to know.
Robert Mays, thanks for being on.
Thanks, buddy.
Let's take a break to talk about Allbirds. They're dedicated to making stylish, comfortable footwear using premium natural materials designed for life's everyday adventures, like the Allbirds Wool Runners, which are comfy shoes made from wool. I've ended up needing these things in LA because it's been cold. It's nice to have comfy, warm shoes when it's 50 degrees, which feels like 20 when you live in Los Angeles. They look good. They're designed simply, no unnecessary logos. They come in a bunch of classic colors, as well as limited edition shades like graphite, moonstone, and marble. You can wear them to work or to play in the office or out on the town. Better yet, Allbirds New Zealand merino wool requires 60% less energy to produce than typical synthetic materials used in shoes. You can feel good about wearing them. Allbirds wool is even ZQ certified, which means it's grown on sustainable farms where they treat the sheep well, because Allbirds believes that comfort, style, and sustainability don't have to be mutually exclusive. Head to allbirds.com. Get your very own pair of soft and cozy wool runners. All right, let's call Alan Sepinwall. All right, on the line right now, one of our OG guests from way back in the day in the BS Report, the famed TV critic, Alan Sepinwall, now at Rolling Stone, wrote The Sopranos Sessions, which I watched the entire Sopranos in 5 weeks, 86 episodes while reading the book along. I highly recommend the experience. It was great. Thank you for writing that book. I enjoyed watching the show and reading it. So thanks.
Well, I'm glad you liked it. That was the whole goal, was to get people watching and talking about Sopranos again.
I want to talk about it in a second, but we got to talk about Luke Perry first. Died at 52, out of nowhere, shocking. And then obviously read all the pieces, including yours, over the last couple of days, and was kind of trying to figure out how to put this career in perspective that was weirdly influential and just captured a time of television when a show like Beverly Hills 90210, which I obviously put in my columns a bunch of times and referenced and talked about, but really had a cultural impact. And I wonder now, like shows, like 13 Reasons Why and Stranger Things and things like that, I think they have the same impact, but it's more of a binge watch, fast, 1-2 week type of thing. This show was, they did 32 episodes one year, and it was just in your life, and it was this event on Monday nights and people getting together, and it got me thinking how that just feels like it was a million years ago. What was your reaction?
I was really thrown by it. I was in the same graduating class as the kids from West Beverly, you know, when the show debuted. And so, everyone I knew was watching it. I grew a very unfortunate pair of sideburns that first year, like every other guy I knew.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was a thing. And the funny thing is, high school shows had been out of favor for a really long time. And that year, I think there were 5 or 6 of them, including like the Ferris Bueller spinoff with Jennifer Aniston and a couple of others. And everyone was completely dismissive of 90210, and that became the huge hit. And I would argue that you wouldn't have the WB and now the CW and like pretty much the last 20, 30 years of teen shows. It was hugely influential in that way.
Yeah, and you think about the biggest shows of the 90s, right? So, the go-to ones would be Seinfeld and Friends and ER. I think NYPD Blue. The shows that just pushed boundaries, took TV to maybe a place that hadn't totally gone to yet, or reinvented some format that used to work and nobody was doing it anymore. And it's weird to think that 90210 was one of those shows, but I really feel like it was. I think there was this void of, kind of that teen drama, soap opera-y kind of show that had just kind of gone away, and was a big thing when we were growing up with Dynasty and Knots Landing and all those types of shows. And
but those shows were about like adults. That was the funny thing. There was this belief that like teenagers either weren't watching TV or they didn't want to watch shows about teenagers. They wanted to see the grown-ups. And then along came this, and along came Dylan McKay, and suddenly it was a phenomenon, and the light bulb went off. And
he was also, it was the perfect match of character and actor. And it was this guy that, we had heard as kids and as in high school and college, you'd always hear about like James Dean and people like that, these heartthrobs, and they're these bad boys with the heart of gold. And I hadn't really seen that in TV that much, or to the maximum kind of potential of it. And then he came in, and now he's dating Brenda, and Brenda's dad doesn't like him. But meanwhile, he has this whole backstory, and his dad is in jail, and he's this rich kid, but he is a good guy. And there was just all these layers to it. And they actually created somebody that I felt like I like this guy. This is a good guy, which is also a really hard thing to do. And I think in the past 25 years, there have been a lot of TV shows that have tried to recreate Dylan McKay in all of these different ways. It is now kind of a go-to character, and there's all these variations of it. But do you feel like he was a prototype of it?
He was, and the reason it's so hard to duplicate him is because, all the time you have these characters who you're told are cool. Dylan was cool. Like, a lot of these guys, the shows and the actors are just trying really hard. You don't necessarily want to put Perry on a par with James Dean or somebody like that, but just in terms of like genuinely cool, seeming like that guy, seeming utterly believable, like everyone would be drawn to him, that he was that magnetic. That seemed absolutely genuine. And, that's the hard thing to copy because, not everybody has that.
And they had the great rivalry / friendship with Brandon, Jason Priestley. And And both of those guys ascend and become super famous. And we know they became super famous, not just because of the ratings of the show. Both of them hosted SNL within a year of each other during a really, really, really esteemed stretch of SNL where you still had Phil Hartman there and you had Mike Myers. And I think Dana Carvey was in one of the things. When Jason Priestley hosted, and he hosted before Luke Perry, Dana Carvey did a Dylan impersonation that I still think is like one of the 20 best impersonations in the history of the show. Like it's like out of control how good it is. But they were just kind of in the pop culture zeitgeist. And I think what that show was able to do, at least for, I don't know, 5 years, was it really felt relevant. Like you felt like somebody felt like left out if they weren't watching it. You know, the conversations were happening and you weren't included. Like you almost had people were watching it just because they didn't want to be left out. And that's another thing that I wonder if that exists anymore. TV is so niche oriented now, and there's just these little pockets, and people love their shows and they talk it. But you know, I don't know what's going on with 90% of the shows right now. And then back in the 90s, that was not the case.
Yeah, no, because you're doing it on your schedule, and maybe for like, you know, a week and a half, everyone's talking about the same thing, but then you move on to something else. And, you know, when Game of Thrones ends in a couple of months, that may be it for water cooler TV.
Yeah, it's sobering. It really might be the last show that I feel like everybody at least has an opinion on. And
yep, and everyone's watching at roughly the same time.
Yeah, now even you have, from a binge watch standpoint, there was so much time between last season and this season that any last person who is ever going to watch the show is trying to catch up for now. It's funny though, binge watching Game of Thrones versus binge watching The Sopranos is a totally different animal. Game of Thrones is so dense and rich. The Sopranos is unbelievable to binge watch. You can literally bang out 4 a night and you cruise through them. It was great. I would have trouble banging out 4 Game of Thrones a night. 90210, you could bang out 20 a day. You just have it on the background while you're doing 9 other things, which is something I used to do. You know, when Dylan left 90210, I felt like that was kind of a seminal moment too. I don't remember. It wasn't something that happened a lot in the annals of TV history. Like Shelley Long left Cheers. Archie Bunker's wife left All in the Family. Radar left MASH. It was always like career suicide to do it. And when he did it, when Luke Perry left, it felt like, man, what are you going to do? But his career after that was interesting. He did all these, did movies, and he was on Oz and tried all these different things. And then eventually they just lured him back with a wad of cash. But I always thought like the way he approached his career was pretty unique. What did you think?
I think he was sensible about it. He understood that they had taken Dylan as far as he could go. You know, there was, you know, by the time the other kids are off in college, he's running around trying to like reclaim his fortune with the help of a mercenary and all
right.
this. It just like
Incredible.
He didn't really fit on the show anymore, and he recognized that. And there was nowhere to go but down if he had stayed. And he kept working. He, you know, by all accounts, was a really nice guy, very sensible, never got a huge head despite how ridiculously famous he was. And he worked really steadily. You know, everybody else was about to be involved in this, like, Curb Your Enthusiasm-esque revival that they're planning. But he wasn't doing it because he had a day job on Riverdale. He was the one who was still working. And now I can't even imagine how they're going to do it without it seeming really sad and in poor taste.
Yeah. I had him on a podcast in 2013, and I had Brian Austin Green on a year before and very carefully kept steering it to 90210, which he was really happy to talk about. And Luke Perry, it was much more of a delicate dance trying to get him to kind of talk about this stuff. And his attitude was like, that shit happened. It was in my past. Like, who cares? But at the same time, it was some fun nuggets. But the thing that I brought up in that podcast, when I worked on Jimmy Kimmel's show, the first year, Luke Perry was on, and we had him in the green room. He was such a good guy. I was talking to him with Tony Barbieri, who's one of the writers, and I fanboyed out for like 2 minutes. He was such a good sport about it. And then he went on. Monica Lewinsky was the guest host, and we had this whole 3 days of Monica Lewinsky where she was the guest host. but we weren't guest co-host, but we weren't allowed to mention Bill Clinton. And at that point of the show, we were so desperate for any sort of headlines, attention, whatever. They actually agreed to that. So poor Jimmy had to do the show every night. He couldn't mention Bill Clinton and had to mention like her bracelets and all this stuff and kind of dance around it. So the last night we had was the night Luke Perry was on. And he comes out and does like 5 minutes and he's sitting next to Monica Lewinsky. And at some point he turns over, he looks over and he goes, yeah, I've always thought you were really cute since that Bill Clinton thing. And it was like it was like this balloon just popped, and then Jimmy was so delighted. And then all of a sudden we could talk about Bill Clinton. It was just classic. But he was a really good sport and a good guy about all that stuff. The Dylan drinking story arc, when Dylan fell off the wagon after his family stole money from him. Still, to me, one of the great, what is it, like Sopranos season 3 and Dylan's drinking? Those are the best two stretches ever in TV history. Is it 1A, 1B for you?
I don't know if my scale is quite the same as yours on that, Bill, but that was a classic for sure.
He just went off the rails. It was good. Kyle, did you ever see that? I got to make Kyle watch those 7 episodes.
902 and
Dylan goes off the rails in one of the greatest ways that's happened. Well, anyway, R.I.P. Luke Perry. Very bummed out, and I really felt like he was this important television character, but hadn't really thought about it until this happened, which is a bummer. But sometimes that's the way it works.
He made the show. Like he wasn't in the first couple of episodes, the pilot, and I think that's one of the reasons everyone was so dismissive of it. And then as soon as he turned up, it was like magic.
Now I watch some of these shows thinking like the dad instead of the younger characters, because now I'm a dad, obviously.
Yeah.
And it's funny. The great James Eckhouse. I don't call him James Eckhouse. I call him the great James Eckhouse, who played Brenda's dad. Dylan dating his daughter, and then, they go to Mexico at one point. I would have been, if somebody did that, I'd be going ape shit. If somebody took my daughter to Mexico. So I might have to watch his again, because maybe I held Dylan McKay in too high esteem. You don't take somebody's 16-year-old daughter to Mexico. Come on, Kyle.
Sorry.
Let's talk about Tony Soprano. Let's take a quick break to talk about Robinhood. It's an investing app that lets you buy and sell stocks, ETFs, options, and cryptos, all commission-free. While other brokerages charge up to $10 for every trade, Robinhood doesn't charge any commission fees, so you can trade stocks and keep all of your profits. Plus, no account minimum deposit needed to get started, so you can start investing at any level. The simple, intuitive design of Robinhood makes investing easy for newcomers and experts alike. View easy-to-understand charts and market data. Place a trade in just 4 taps. On your smartphone, you can also view stock collections such as 100 most popular. With Robinhood, you can learn how to invest in the market. As you build your portfolio, discover new stocks. Track your favorite companies. Get custom notifications for price movements so you never miss the right moment to invest. Robinhood is giving listeners of the BS podcast a free stock like Apple, Ford, or Sprint to help you build your portfolio. All you have to do is sign up at simmons.robinhood.com. Once again, simmons.robinhood.com. So this is another iconic character that created a new archetype, shall we say, the anti-hero, which is not an original point, and people have made that point many times. It struck me as I rewatched this entire show, just how many horrible things he did in it, and how I still liked him in the end. And it's like Breaking Bad is the classic just descent into somebody becoming a bad guy. But Tony, episode to episode, would just do one horrible thing in each one. And I keep coming back to the bartender at Bada Bing. What was that guy's name?
Georgie.
Over the course of 86 episodes, Tony just attacks him like 7 times, just bashing the phone against his head. And he just was not a great guy. And I really think that the reason we loved him so much was how great Gandolfini was. And I really wonder what that show is like with anybody else. And, the point I want to make is I was staggered by how good Gandolfini was in this show. And I think I think it's number one for me all time for performances. It's the best.
No, I agree. When I went back to rewatch it to write the book, I had sort of felt like, all right, well, he's great, but Cranston was great, Ham was great, Elizabeth Moss was great. There's sort of we're in this golden age, and it's like, no, he's the best. It's amazing how many different moments where he's like doing nothing. He's in the car, he's singing along to the radio, and it's riveting just because it's him.
Right. And let's say like when he shows up at the Russian call girl, whatever you call her, apartment, and the John Hurd is there.
Yep.
And Gaten Feeney just beats him up with his belt, takes his belt off, and just whips the guy.
That's Zellman. It's Peter Rieger who he whips with the belt.
Oh, Peter Rieger, sorry. Just whips the guy with his belt, and it's fucking brutal. He really, there's just nobody like that. I was also struck by how funny the show was, and I don't think The Sopranos gets enough credit for how fucking funny it was and how like funny the Pine Barrens episode is, which is always the show that's mentioned as like the Watershed show. I actually disagree because it's got the whole subplot of, I think Carmela and Furio. There's like some really dead spots that aren't them in the Pine Barrens. The Pine Barrens part's unbelievable. I actually thought the peak of the show was the last 2 episodes of season 5.
Those are tremendous. Yeah, when they kill Adriana and then when he kills Tony B.
And sorry, I'm not doing spoiler alerts because this show happened 13 years ago. But the combo, the Adriana episode, and I forgot how amazing she was. Dre De Matteo, especially season 5, which she won an Emmy for. She's out of control that season. But that episode and just Silvio, just the switch turning and he just becomes evil. And then Buscemi, the next episode. To me, that's the peak of the show. I think you could maybe say that season 3 is probably has the most going on. What would you say was what was the apex mountain of this show?
I still really love the first season just because Livia is one of my favorite characters, and the idea of Tony's mom trying to kill him seems like kind of the purest distillation of the idea of the show, family versus family. I love a lot of what happens in the final season 2. Season 5 is really great though, and that's the one, those 2 episodes, like a lot of people just wanted The Sopranos to be this straightforward mob show, like who's going to get whacked, what moves is Tony going to make. And for the most part, the show wasn't interested in that. It would do it kind of occasionally. But an episode like Long-Term Parking, which is the Adriana one, that's pretty much just straightforward mob stuff. And it's amazing. Yeah. Like if they had just done that, it would have been incredible. It just had a lot of other things on its mind too.
Watching it, and I had only watched it when I watched it in last decade. So I didn't really remember a lot. And watching season 4, my wife was falling asleep during half of them. And, and I was like, man, the season 4 is just really not that good. Like it had a couple good episodes, but for the most part felt really disjointed. And it was interesting. You did in your book, you did, just a series of long form interviews with David Chase, the guy who created The Sopranos. And even he admits that season 4, they kind of lost the steering wheel a little bit, which I thought was really fascinating for him to reveal that. Were you surprised by that?
No, because you could tell just watching it, and you could see like towards the end, like every episode had 5 or 6 credited writers, which is usually only a thing that happens if there's a real scramble there. And that was the first one I went up covering at the Star Ledger, and I felt like, I'd been handed this lemon. Like, here I get The Sopranos right when it's going off the cliff. But then that season has one of the best finales. And then season 5, from there on, the show was great again.
It has, season 4 has, isn't that the episode where Dr. Melfi gets assaulted?
No, that's in season 3.
Oh, that's season 3. So season 4 had Pine Barrens and...
No, that's also season 3.
Oh, shit. So what was in season 4?
Cut off.
Oh,
season 4 is mainly Carmela flirting with Furio, but the big episode is Ralphie gets his head chopped off.
Yeah, season 3 was... that was a really good one. Was that Annabella Sciorra too? Was that season 3?
Yep, Gloria.
It's hard to remember the seasons when you watch 86 in 4.5 weeks. It's hard to remember what episode was in which part. I was struck rewatching how good the last season was. And
it's one of the best closing stretches ever.
Yeah. I don't know why I didn't totally remember that, but I think part of it was just being jaded by the complicated feelings about the season finale. But holy fucking shit. it's basically split into 2 seasons, which you explain in your book that they had to do for contractually pretend it was all 1 season, but it's really 2 seasons.
Yep.
And those last, is it 6 or 7 to end it? 7, right?
It's 7 episodes, I think.
If you can
Possibly 9.
If you can get past poor Robert Eiler, who's the Marco Ravioni of this whole show, and probably deserves his own podcast at this point. A lot of really high usage rate for Robert Eiler in that last season, the last 20 episodes.
Yep.
Really just in it. It felt like Chase was trying to explore some sort of when a father gets disappointed by his son type of theme, but really, really explored it and didn't really have the right actor for it. But if you get past that, I thought it was incredible. And that leads me to the ending, which now that it's been 13 years, now that I know what's going to happen, now that I know my cable didn't go out, and now that I just experienced the whole show from start to finish again, the ending's amazing. I'm actually all in on the ending. I am a fucking full Kool-Aid drinker of the ending. It's really good. It actually is exactly how it should have ended. It's kind of perfect. And how many people feel this way?
I definitely do impress for the book. I've encountered a lot of people who have done a 180 like you on the ending where they were mad at the time and now like it. Not everybody. Some people are still upset. But more often than not, people seem to like, that it ended that way.
And you thought, you wrote it with Matt Zoller Seitz. One of you was convinced that he died. That was you, right?
No, it's more of a joke. I think like it's easier to see the argument, that he died, than I did back when it aired, 12, 13 years ago. But I think it's ambiguous. We talk about that at length. I think the scene is about death, but you don't actually see him die, and you can either decide or not decide that he gets killed there.
I think he 100% died after watching the show and the clues that he sprinkled in. And especially the Bobby Bacala the boat scene when they like, what do you think happens when you get whacked? Do you think you hear it? And I think everything goes back. Then he calls back to it in the second to last episode. Like he clearly was trying to tell us, hey, get ready. This is going to happen. That's how I feel. I don't know if I'm right, but that's my feeling.
No, and it's not an unreasonable thing. And there's so many clues and just so many like hints about death sprinkled throughout that episode, throughout that season. Like you definitely want to be watching it and he wants you to be watching it and feeling like, oh, Tony could die at any moment. Life is so fragile. Life is so precious. And we walk through this world and you never know when it's going to happen. And maybe this is it for him.
It's really well constructed and really well done. And it's funny watching all that in a row. It starts affecting your behavior. I definitely felt like I was a little more aggro during those 4 weeks. Like something wasn't working out at the Ringer and I just wanted to whack the person. I also, the funniest thing that I started doing at my house was that whole thing. Like when somebody's insulted or a joke or like, Bill, you're finally going to tape your podcast today, huh? Oh, like it's just the way those guys interacted was so unique. And, my favorite scenes are just them at the Bing or playing cards or just busting each other's balls or taking something personally. The worst scenes, you're going to be unhappy to hear this. There might have been some fast forwarding during some of the Dr. Melfi scenes for me.
I'm shocked to hear you say this, Bill, after all the time I've known you. Shocked.
It wasn't a pure 86 episode run. I probably chopped maybe 4% of it just by being like, you know what, not really in the mood for another weird Dr. Melfi scene. That character didn't work for me 20 years ago. And I don't know. You're higher on Dr. Melfi though.
And I was higher this time than I was back in the day. I used to think that Lorraine Bracco was kind of the weak link of the major cast members because she would seem stiff a lot of the time. And when I went back and watched it again for the book, it seemed more like, no, that's deliberate. Like she's uncomfortable being around this guy a lot. And there are moments when she's not, and she's really great in those.
I guess the biggest flaw of this show, and if, the Mount Rushmore for me, which has 5 shows on it, all of them have flaws. the flaw for this show is the supporting actors. Some of the acting is just not good. It's just not. There's some really kind of subpar actors. So when somebody like Buscemi or Joe Pantoliano, or Frank Vincent, guys like that come in that are like real actors who really know what the fuck they're doing, it stands out. And maybe he intended it to be that way. But I look at somebody like Bobby Bacala, who actually got better by the last season, was actually pretty good. But those first couple seasons, like he's just bad. And there's over and over again, there's people in these parts that are actually like half important parts, and they're just not actors.
There's definitely people who had to veer out of their lane more than they should have, just because other characters got killed off, and they got promoted, further up on the bench than they probably should have. And then even somebody like Steve Van Zandt works almost entirely just as comic relief, and if you try to do more with him, it's problematic. But then you have a scene like him with Adriana, and it's terrifying.
Yeah,
so
that's true. Yeah, it was an amazing experience to rewatch it. I think it's available. It's on HBO now, obviously, but I think it's also on Amazon Prime. And now I'm thinking about the next binge watch. There's been rumors of the Simmons family maybe plowing through Mad Men. Just rumors right now. Whispers. I've
heard that's a good show, Bill.
There's been whispers that we might be plowing through all of those, and I just got to decide. It's got a little. I'd be interested to see how many a night you could watch a Mad Men. It feels like 2 would be the max. What do you think?
Well, I think Mad Men's a little less pulpy than Sopranos. With Sopranos, there's always some kind of what's going to happen next and who's going to get killed element to it that can pull you along, even though the episodes, I think, are really dense and sort of laden with meaning in the same way that Mad Men is. You'd certainly go back and rewatch Breaking Bad faster than I expect you would Mad Men.
Yeah, and Breaking Bad definitely. But I feel like that was only like 5-6 years ago, though. I feel like I just did that. I'm eyeing The Wire as well. Because in the power rankings right now, The Wire was 1 heading into the Sopranos binge, but now I think Sopranos might be back to the 1 spot again for me. I think it might go.
So now you got to test it out, I think.
I think it's Sopranos, The Wire, Breaking Bad, Mad Men, and then Thrones 5th for the 5 show Mount Rushmore. That's how I'd go right now. What would you do for your 5? Rank those 5.
It would be Sopranos, Wire, Breaking Bad, Mad Men, Deadwood as my 5th.
Deadwood?
Nice.
Yep.
So what'd you bump out?
I'd bump out Game of Thrones.
Man.
Easily. I like Game of Thrones a lot, but I don't think it's in the class of any of those.
I'm torn on it because the best Game of Thrones episodes, like the peak Game of Thrones, is just some of the greatest TV I've ever seen in my life. Like, what was the episode when Tyrion takes over the battle from Joffrey, that fucking loser?
Blackwater.
I just remember watching that for the first time and just being staggered by it. Same thing for Red Wedding. Like some of the iconic shows. Like I really did. The best version of that show is still as good as I've ever seen on television. But I think the totality of it, I don't know.
It's very uneven, and it's more sort of like it's a show better served to like watch clips on YouTube than it is to go back and rewatch whole episodes or whole seasons, I think.
Yeah.
It's great in moments for sure.
And you feel like Lost has kind of fallen out of this argument?
I don't know that Lost was ever in the argument of like, top 5 of all time. I think in our TV book that Matt and I did, it was somewhere in the 20s.
No, I didn't mean the totality of the show, but just like the best possible episode of a show.
Oh man, the best possible episode of Lost is pretty high up there. Like The Constant and a couple of the other ones are really amazing. Yeah. But that's a very uneven show for sure.
Yeah, Lost was like one of those basketball players that could have 47 one night and then like 7 the next night. Just bounce around. Is there any show right now that's out there that you feel like even has a chance to be discussed as reverentially or no?
I think Atlanta could, in terms of things that are still airing right now. That has a possibility. But again, it's sort of like how many people are watching Atlanta? How many people are watching BoJack Horseman as opposed to, how many people were watching Sopranos back when it was on, or how many people are watching Thrones right now?
Can I tell you the most important show for my kids right now? And you're going to think I'm a bad parent. And I don't care.
I will not. I will never judge a parent for what their kids watch.
My kids love Big Mouth, and it's completely inappropriate, and they shouldn't be watching it. And I found out they were watching it after they had already watched like 18 of them. And now it's like I'm in no man's land with it, because if you tell kids not to watch something, they're going to end up, it's going to make them watch it even more. And I want my kids to have a sense of humor, but they think that show is absolutely amazing, and I'm a bad parent, I think, for letting them watch it.
I don't know. I mean, I've had long conversations about this with Nick Kroll. He said like they didn't intend for kids to watch it, but they found a lot of them have.
Yeah.
And it has prompted good conversations with their parents about it. So I guess in that respect, it's okay. My kids have not watched it, and I think if I tried to show it to them, my wife would kick me out of the house. But, it's a really good and empathetic show, so you're not a bad parent for them having seen it, Bill.
We had a soccer tournament this weekend where we all had to stay over at this hotel in Temecula, which is 2 hours from LA. And all the parents were in the lobby. We were all having drinks, and 10 of the kids were in my room. And I went back to my room to get something, and it was like a record scratch, followed by multiple kids going, "Zoe, turn it off, turn it off." But she couldn't find the button. And then I hear on the TV, one of the characters goes, "You're a fucking bitch." And I'm like, "What are you guys?" And they were watching Big Mouth, and they were mortified. And then they're like, "Don't tell anyone. Don't tell our parents. Don't." And I'm like, "All right, guys, I got you. I'm not going to talk about this now. I'm just going to talk about it on my podcast later for 1 million people." But yeah, so Big Mouth has penetrated the don't tell our parents we're watching this vortex. What's your feeling before we go on these last 6 episodes of Game of Thrones?
I'm really going to be interested to see how it works, because it sounds like every episode is going to be 80 or 90 minutes long, which is usually not good, but they've got so much story to cover and so many characters to deal with, and they work on a scale that no other show ever has. So I'm hopeful, but I don't know yet. I didn't really love the last season, but it's also been gone for 2 years, so I'm excited to be back in this world for a little bit.
I cannot figure out why they're doing this movie treatment of these episodes, and what is, unless there's some sort of contractual thing that I don't totally understand, but just why not just do 10 1-hour episodes?
It's very strange. Like, for years, they insisted that they didn't want to do episodes longer than 50 minutes, even though they shot much more material, if I'm remembering right, than they were using. And so all of a sudden at the end, they're kind of flipping it and they're going almost double that.
I don't know the answer. Is your book doing well? People like it?
Yeah, the book's doing well. It's been doing almost too well in that we keep selling out the printings, but it's still in stock at Amazon right now, and it's going to be a new big printing in about a week. And so if you don't want to order from Amazon and you want to wait, it should be available everywhere else again, within a week or so.
So your publisher needs to get their shit together, is what you're telling me.
Its demand has vastly exceeded supply thus far.
I've written 2 books, and both times that happened, and it was really frustrating the second time, because we had this actual real instant of this happening where there's proof and here's what's going to happen, and here's why we have to print this many books, and they still didn't. And then it happened again, and I almost lost my mind. I hope all those emails have been destroyed from 2009 that I wrote angrily to everybody. We went to a thing in Washington. We had there's 1,200 people there, and they had 200 books. And this was after I had sent 100 emails hey, Washington, there's a lot of fans there. We got to make sure we're prepared. And we had 200 books. It was great.
The sense I've gotten is it's more on the end of the distributors, like Barnes & Noble vastly underordered it, for instance.
Yeah, because they don't want to get stuck with them.
They're catching up.
Yeah, they don't. They're always going to play it safe. But this was a really good idea for a book. Do you have a next idea for a book?
There's some things that I'm talking about, and then Matt and I are talking about, but nothing that either of us can announce quite yet.
What about the 90210 sessions?
I do have one good 90210 story, not related to Dylan, but a few years back, I wound up guest lecturing at a UCLA class taught by Charles Rosin, who was the showrunner.
Oh, that guy's amazing! Yeah,
yep.
He was the David Chase of 90210.
and I agreed to do it on one condition, which is, and this is like hardcore 90210 nerdery here, which is they repeated their sophomore year, or they repeated their junior year, whatever, because they're juniors in the first year.
Yeah.
And then they go off to the summer to work at the beach club. They come back and they're still juniors, and then they're seniors. And I wanted to know what happened. And Rosin said, all right, you come and you lecture my class, I will tell you. And at the very end of it, he said, all right, what it was Jason Priestley felt embarrassed to be playing a high school sophomore. We intended for the kids to be sophomores. And he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. And so there's the episode where Brendan is dating the single mom for an episode. And there's supposed to be a line where he says, I'm only a sophomore. And he says, I'm only a junior. And he would not do a take where he said, I'm only a sophomore. And so the kids all wind up repeating their junior year because of that.
That's just ludicrous. I can't believe that.
Yep.
Well, you know what else was ludicrous? Casting Gabriel Carteris as a high school sophomore when she was 30. That was the era when we did stuff like this and we had no internet check and balances. You could just kind of do whatever you wanted.
Oh, no, we knew. We knew.
It was a running joke. That was the other thing we should have mentioned with 90210 was it was all pre-internet. So we all had the same jokes and whatever about this show, but nobody knew that anybody else had the same jokes. So all the stuff that you made fun of in your little groups, everybody else was too, but you hadn't really no idea that was happening. It was simpler times. Simpler times, Alan Sepinwall. This was fun. Thank you, as always, for coming on. And I'm excited for your next book.
Anytime, Bill. My pleasure.
All right. Thanks to ZipRecruiter. Don't forget to go to ZipRecruiter.com/BS. Thanks to Robert Mays and Alan Sepinwall. Thanks to Mercari, the selling app that makes it fast and easy to sell almost anything. Take a few pics, add a description. Boom, your item is listed. Buyers in all 50 states. Everything ships easily. No awkward meetups. Find Mercari in the app stores or on Mercari.com. Mercari. Mercari.com. Thanks to Allbirds. They make stylish, comfortable footwear designed for life's everyday adventures like the Allbirds Wool Runners, which are made from wool. These shoes look great. The design is super simple, perfect in the office, out in town, or in my case, in the LA when it's like 49 degrees in the mornings. You want some warm shoes. Head to allbirds.com to get your own very pair. Your own very pair? Your very own pair. Why can't I do this? I have like very own dyslexia. Your very own pair of soft and cozy wool runners. Check that out. And don't forget to go to simmons.robinhood.com as well. Remember, they're giving our listeners a free stock to help you build your portfolio. Check it out. Back with one more BS podcast later in the week. Until then.